Today on Locked On Red Wings, Jake Walman caps a thrilling comeback win over the Vancouver Canucks with a historic game winner.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Scotty, happy Monday, and a happy Monday it is if you're a Red Wings fan.
It's nothing hits like a victory Monday after football season's over. You know what I'm saying? That's those are we take those. That's the most fired up I've been after a hockey game in a minute. That was an absolute electric factory. The boys are buzzing. We're buzzing. That was what a phenomenal first game back from the All-Star break for the Detroit Red Wings. It was absolutely incredible. Duel in the D later that night as well. Like, LCA was just bumping. Both were sold out. Hockey Town is back, baby.
Did the Pistons end up winning that game too? I know they had a lead at one point.
No, they lost, but
okay.
I don't know why you would even bring them up and trying to lighten people's moods. But yeah, it was really, really awesome.
Genuinely
obviously.
Didn't know if they won. I know they were leading.
No, they didn't. We'll talk all about the Wings here, but yeah, just an awesome day of hockey. Saturday was for the city, and hats off to the LCA ice team. Got a lot of turnover there in the building, not just the ice team. I guess everybody that works in the building. Flipping from a Wings game to a college hockey game later that night is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of this game, Scotty, we could go take this game period by period and just because first period, Red Wings looked great. Second period, they fell apart. And then the third period, they were great. So in lieu of doing that and just basically breaking down every play of this game, we're going to try a slightly different approach. And we're going to dedicate segment one here to the difference maker, or the biggest takeaway, like what made the difference in this hockey game for the Detroit Red Wings in a thrilling 4-3 overtime winner. Scotty, I'm going to go to you first. What was your biggest difference maker?
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to single out one specific one is difficult in this game. I mean, it's really hard to not just point to Walman. It was obviously a massive difference maker. I feel like that's kind of a layup, but that is obviously he had the game winner, another gritty for the city. Just absolutely fantastic stuff there. Gave the silencer too, gave a little bit of a shush and then did the gritty. It was a really solid one, solid 8 or 9 out of 10 gritty there. But yeah, I mean, we talked about him over the All-Star break as well. And just we've talked about it a lot, I guess, just the rise that he continues to have and has had since becoming a member of the Detroit Red Wings. Had a great game. I thought he had a really solid game before even, netting the game winner. And I think it's really hard to not look at him. There's obviously quite a few in this game, and there's some things that didn't go well as well, which we'll certainly talk about. But I think Walman is a great place to start.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about difference makers in this game, it was pretty much him. And it could have been him on either end of the spectrum, depending on how the result went, right? Because he had a lot of making up to do after he slew-footed Alex Lyon by accident, resulting in the first goal. And I'm like, oh, buddy.
Play did happen. Yeah, I forgot about that.
But then in the third period, like you said, he took that slap shot from the point. Michael Rasmussen tipped it home, so he got an assist there. That was the game-tying goal, I do believe, in the third period. And then in overtime, you get this fantastic feed from Lucas Raymond for a breakaway, got hauled down, and they won it on a penalty shot in overtime, which the Red Wings have never done in the entire existence of their franchise. So Jake Walman is now in the record books for the Detroit Red Wings, and I think it's only the fourth time in NHL history an overtime game has ever been won on a penalty shot as well. So and like when I have, you talked about, obviously Jake Walman to you was the biggest difference maker, and he was on my list as well. For me, and it's kind of a cop out, but like I almost want to say the team as a whole, right? Or third periods in general. Because this team in the third period, I mean, everyone knows coming into the game, they're second in the league in third period comebacks. I think they said a statistic that Vancouver has never lost a game this season when leading after 2. And I was like, yeah, but they're playing the Red Wings, who also historically have a ton of comebacks. And, I was trying to pump the brakes. They had an abysmal second period, which we will talk about, as you said. And everyone's like, this game's over. And it's like, they're down 2 goals in the NHL with an entire period left and an intermission to reset. Like, that was a tough second. And if they lose, it's because that tough second. But this team is really good at coming back from deficits, and they did it. And like credit to the team, credit to Derek Lalonde, like getting them to mentally reset and go back out there and play their game in the third period. That was huge. And like to me, next to Jake Walman obviously being clutch, it's just the team as a whole was the biggest difference maker. The third period was the difference maker because it's really hard when you're down on yourself in a period like that to be able to reset.
I think it's one of the coolest, probably is like a really like layman way of explaining it, but I think it's one of the highlighted strengths of this team this year, man. I think that there is something about having confidence from a fan all the way to, a player on the team and a coach. There's something about that confidence that a team has where it doesn't matter what the score is after 2. This team has a chance to win every single hockey game. And that is something that we have not experienced in Detroit, just in general, for our hockey team in a while. But it's also something that as we get down the stretch and as these games become even more and more meaningful on a game-to-game basis, that's going to be a huge trait. And again, it's something, obviously the players, it means a lot to them and the coaching staff and whatnot. That's a great vote of confidence and great for team building. But just from a fan's perspective or from a viewer perspective, going in and knowing even against the best team in hockey down 2 goals with 1 period to go, you have a chance to win because that's just how the Red Wings play hockey. And obviously we've talked about it a lot. We would love to be in a position where maybe we don't have to do so many third period comebacks. Right. That'd be kind of cool. We'll talk about the second period here in a second, but there is something about that. I think that mentality that helps us, the viewer, but I'm sure is a huge vote of confidence to the players and the staff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This team they have almost a team-wide X factor. And, NHL.com came out with a really nice piece after the win about the Detroit Red Wings comeback victory and how David Perron said January 2nd or whatever it was when they beat the San Jose Sharks. He said, we're going to get 18 points before the break. And Derek Lalonde said something along the lines like, has he seen this team play lately? He was like, 18 points. And then they got 20.
They got 20.
And so
they talked about it on the broadcast too,
right.
Not to cut you off, but like they talked about it on the broadcast too, where, they were teasing, Bally was teasing their interview with Larkin. They have a sit down with Larkin coming out and whatnot. And it looks pretty cool, right? Anytime Larkin speaks for long periods of time is a cool thing. But they talked specifically at one point, they talked to him and other players about that game where they got off the plane like 3 hours before puck drop and then went in and won. Like, was that Toronto? And then went in and won anyway. And they talked about how big that game was for like team chemistry and for kind of like team confidence going forward. And
it builds, man.
It's stuff like that really, really lights a fire.
It builds, and the team's beginning to believe in itself that they can do this. And
yeah,
crucial time for them to get that confidence and get that momentum and carry that through because they're going on a really difficult Western Canada road trip.
Yeah.
Plus Seattle. a month before trade deadline. Like, this is the month that's going to determine if they're going to be pushing for the playoffs or if they're going to be coasting to the finish. Like, this month's going to determine what March 8th looks like. So they need to continue to go streaking.
Just like last year.
Yeah. So anyway, Scotty, we'll take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to come back in segment 2 with our notable performers. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Sleeper. It's past the halfway point of the NHL season, and regardless of where the Detroit Red Wings are in the current standings, tied for third in the Atlantic Division as of Sunday, by the way, points-wise, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is the #1 choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, heck of a game from him, Jake Walman will record more or less than Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Red Wings fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are going to talk about our notable performers from the 4-3 overtime thriller against the Vancouver Canucks. And Scotty, I hope it's all right with you. I'm going to lead off with this one. Please. Because I think we're both going to say the same person anyways. And we already mentioned Jake. I mean, I want to beat you to the punch here. Jake Walman was obviously the guy we mentioned in segment 1. We talked about him already. Lucas Raymond had a heck of a game too. Obviously, he scored a goal of the year candidate in the first period. But the rest of his performance from then to the end of the game was crucial to the victory of the Detroit Red Wings. And he continues to prove himself as a commodity, not just a commodity, but a cornerstone of this Detroit Red Wings core as he has grown into that role this season, which is growth we hoped to have seen.
Yeah, I think if you want a game to point to on has Lucas Raymond adjusted and grown physically to the point where he can handle his own and not get knocked around as much at the NHL level, I think that this is a game that you point to. And obviously he took a shoulder to the face. So like that, you know, people are like, oh, well, he had to leave the game because of a hit. Like got a game misconduct, like not really a clean hit.
And a 2-game suspension.
So yeah, I don't really think that that's like a fair criticism. I think a lot of people would have to leave the game temporarily at a minimum for an illegal hit, quite literally.
Concussion protocol.
Right, yeah. But came back, still looked good after, was finishing hits, was playing with a little bit of a fire under him after taking a couple really, really big hits from guys that are much bigger than him, but did not waver. Like I said, got really physical back in the second half of the game once he returned.
He was mad.
I think what?
Said he was mad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Big time. He was mad. And like, I love it. But he was mad. But he didn't let the anger lead to like stupid penalties or anything like that. Like he was just finishing hits and playing aggressive hockey. And I really do. I think that this was a great game to look at in terms of, you know, like the big criticisms of him in the first 2 years and about how he was small and got knocked around too easily and whatnot. From goal to hits to just the third period in general, I think this is a 1-game vacuum of him trying to put that to bed.
Right. And obviously people are going to point towards the goal as to like the big thing from this hockey game. Right. And it was beautiful, right? He takes the puck. Jeff Petrie made a beautiful pass around 2 pressuring 4 checkers to find Lucas Raymond in the defensive zone. Lucas Raymond pitches it up to David Perron, who's going off for a line change. David Perron then chips it back and he just bursts with a burst of speed down the wing past Tyler Myers, cuts in on DeSmith and just buries it. It was a goal of the year candidate. And just like all the passing was exactly how you want passing to work when you have a speedy winger like that. But it's really the overtime. that overtime winner does not really happen without Lucas Raymond. And I will stand by that because he had the puck behind the net. And I believe it was Elias Pettersson who was draped all over Lucas Raymond in the defensive zone. And we saw last year when Lucas Raymond was under pressure, he turned it over and cost the Red Wings a game in overtime. And not to say an overtime turnover last year and then not a turnover this year is a sign of like, because it's just one example of each. But this year, he was able to fight Elias Pettersson off through pressure along the board and find Jake Walman on the other end of the ice for the breakaway, which ultimately he got cross-checked down on for the penalty shot. Like Lucas Raymond, the big thing we had to talk about with him this offseason was we wanted him to add weight so he doesn't get pushed around as easily. And like you said, he has done that. He has been much tougher to knock off the puck. And he just had a really great game. And they missed him when he was out for the majority of the second period after taking that headshot. So I'm glad he's okay. I'm glad he's back because this team does need this rising star.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I also think somebody that was on mine was Patrick Kane. I thought that obviously the assist there to Sprong on the power play was fantastic. But for, first game back, how is he going to look? Are they going to ease him into it? Especially in the second and third periods, they really utilized him a lot. They threw him out there. I didn't think he looked any different from how he looked before. Obviously had the great pass to Sprong, like I said. I know that you had said before we started recording that the second line in general got off to a really slow start in this game, which I don't agree with at all. But Kane in a vacuum, for somebody who everybody was kind of had their eyes on and was like, how's he going to look? First game back, hasn't played in a while, with the injury concerns and everything. I thought he looked more than fine and perfectly comfortable out there, which I thought was a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of, it's not a new second line. Like we've seen this second line before Kane got injured, but for all intents and purposes, like this is a line that has to find its chemistry again because David Perron spent the bulk of January on the first line. So Comfer spent it with different line mates with Kane out. Then near the end of the January, they bumped him to the second line with Comfer, Perron, they did. Now Kane's back. So it's going to be a line that's going to take a little bit to find its groove. But in the third period, they looked a lot better. And JT Compher as a whole looked a lot better in the third. So I would agree. And obviously, it was a power play goal, but Patrick Kane assisted on Daniel Sprong's power play goal to make it 3-2 because he was able to
pass. By the way.
What
beautiful pass.
That's Patrick Kane, right?
It's so disgusting. Yeah.
And then, I mean, you said the second line, but the third line just continues to be the diamond in the rough of this team. Like they have found the perfect spot and perfect chemistry with these three guys. In fact, they led the Red Wings in Corsi for percentage and expected goals for percentage in this game. Andrew Kopp was out there for 12 shot attempts for and 6 shot attempts against at 5-on-5. It was 10 and 6 for Rasmussen and Fisher. And Christian Fischer actually had the secondary assist on Rasmussen's goal. And it was such beautiful. Like if you watch the replay of that goal, the game tying goal, it was because Rasmussen and because Christian Fischer are such like they got the dog mentality. They're gonna when you dump the puck into the corner, they're actually going to win the puck battle.
Yeah.
Like they actually win dumps and chases because that's their style of play. Christian Fischer got down in the corner. He forced the Vancouver Canucks defenseman to try and backhand pass it behind the net. Michael Rasmussen won that battle, got it over to Christian Fischer, who sent it to the point. Like that line, their job is just to grind out puck possession in the corners, and they're doing it so well. Then Andrew Kopp defensively made a couple of really clutch plays covering for defenders down low in front of the net, which is exactly, what you signed him to do. And of course, it resulted in the game tying goal. They were just, they just continue to be super good. They just continue to be probably the most consistently dominating line on the Detroit Red Wings. Granted, quality of competition, got to keep that in mind, but like their usage has been perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so funny when thinking back to the beginning of the year when we, everybody was trying to find like the gritty defense line and Newsy was mixing and matching guys to try to find that chemistry. And it only took till after the new year, but I think they finally found their gritty, whatever they call it at the beginning, the lockdown like line. That's what when they tried to put Comfer and Kopp and everybody all on one line together. And I think they finally kind of found their version of that.
Yeah, and then obviously it goes without saying, Seider was fantastic. We can't not mention Seider. He was fantastic.
Absolutely.
Just very physical in this game. He was really locking it down in the defensive zone all game long. Made some really nice passes. I mean, that's just more Seider. He's so good. I'm so happy with his development as a defenseman this season in a really tough situation that they've put him in, and he's doing a really good job. So
yeah,
goes without saying, Moritz Seider was really good.
For sure. Ben Sherrod had a couple of really nice passes, put his body on the line a couple of times as well. That's, give and take. Had a couple of blow-ups too in his own zone. So that's,
Yeah.
that's
In
the Ben Sherrod experience. There was one play specifically, I think in the second, where he went for a hit and just completely left
whiffed.
Petrie out to dry, like completely, just absolutely screwed Jeff Petrie over. But
Also,
had a couple of really
he
good passes and had a really big block shot there in the third as well that he was hobbling around a little bit after, but that's Ben Sherrod, baby.
well, both he and Sider had some making up to do because Sider didn't recognize that the penalty was about to end on the power play and didn't back out of the offensive zone, let Filip Hronek go down for a breakaway goal. And then Ben Sherrod completely left Elias Pettersson wide open in front of the net for the third 3-on-1 goal. But I mean, it's easy to cherry pick mistakes. And it's a lot harder to look at individual, like little things that they're doing right, because with defensemen, if they're doing things right, you're not going to notice it, but they did a lot right in this game. Just a couple moments, but it's what it is. The game was really fun.
Yeah.
We got to go to another quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the second period. It was really rough, and then look at the playoff picture as a whole, because it was a pretty good day for Red Wings fans off the ice as well,
baby.
because we're in it. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $100 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, we were very close to having a very different atmosphere on this hockey game. In fact, we're trying to start this a little bit more structured game recaps, because a lot of times energy is very frantic and there's a lot of thoughts. So we're trying to clean it up a little bit. And in terms of difference maker, I very nearly put 7 minutes of consecutive power play time and no goals as the big reason why they lost that game, if they had lost, because that second period with that as the focal point, just embarrassing.
It was brutal. And the thing was, it wasn't even like, there's some power plays where you think to yourself afterwards, you go, okay, we got opportunities. Goalie went crazy, missed a stick maybe, or got like poked away at the last second. We had our opportunities. We had a couple of high danger shots, just didn't go our way. I liked how the power play looked, right? That happens plenty. And vice versa as well. You're like, wow, it did not look very good, but we got a goal, whatever. This was 7 minutes where for a solid 3 of them, I didn't even remember we were on the power play. I was like, this is if it wasn't for icing not being called, I would have not known we were even on the power play. That's how little pressure they consistently got for almost half of the 7 minutes of power play they had there. It was horrific. It was brutal. And then obviously to end 7 minutes straight on the power play, not scored a goal in the literal second that it goes back to even strength. Filip Hronek, of all people, it was the perfect storm of garbage. It was just the perfect storm of crap. You have 7 minutes of power play. Your power play looks awful for all 7 minutes. You don't score a goal. And then longtime Red Wing defenseman comes out of the box and immediately scores a breakaway goal.
That just happened, by the way, too.
I thought the game was over just because I was like, oh, from a momentum perspective, this is toast, right? This is, I'm deflated watching it. I can't imagine how deflating that is to be a player. And props to them for turning around and still getting a win, because that was a brutal stretch.
That is something that has happened a few times. The game against Ottawa that they just played a week and a half ago, Brady Tkachuk came out of the box, Moritz Seider blew a tire, and he went down and scored. It's always the last person you want to see to score a goal against your team. And I don't know, obviously Moritz Seider blowing a tire, that's just it. I mean, that's just bad luck. But in this game, I think Derek Lalonde mentioned after the game that, Seider has to be keeping something along the lines of Seider has to keep in mind, when the penalty's ending, and back out of the zone a little bit. This time it was, I think, an errant pass really from Dylan Larkin that set it off going back the other way. But that we have to keep in mind, it's slightly new units for the Detroit Red Wings coming into the second half of the season here, post All-Star break. They're tinkering with some things, but that doesn't really excuse 7 minutes of consecutive power play time. And I think like 30 of that was a 5-on-3 where they just could not. I think they had 3 shots in that 7-minute stretch. Like you have got to take a lead. You've got to score 1 goal on 7 minutes of like minimum on 7 minutes of consecutive power play time. And then to let that come out and score immediately as it expires. Like, no wonder the rest of the second period completely unraveled. They were shook. I was shook. I was on the back. Like, I'm like, because one, it's Filip Hronek. And no, I have no ill will towards Filip Hronek. I loved his time here. I thought he was a really frustrating at times, but a really fun offensive defenseman to watch. But like, you never want the guy you traded away to be the guy who scores a breakaway goal on you. Especially when he only had 3 goals on the season and Pius Suter got an assist. Filip Hronek had a goal and 2 assists. Like, it was quite a game for ex-Red Wings in that second period. They were falling out.
I miss my dog Pius Suter, let me tell you. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but it was a beauty.
They both had really good games. Although Filip Hronek did pull classic Filip Hronek and nearly blew the game for the Vancouver Canucks in the third period, right? Where he mishandled the puck and ended up going right on Casey DeSmith, where Robbie Fabry then attacked the loose puck. I mean, that with a minute left too. But it was a great game for the both of them. Filip Hronek playing with Quinn Hughes is getting a lot of minutes. But, you know, we're Locked On Red Wings. If you want to hear Locked On Canucks, check them out.
Great year.
Great year for them. They're having that's a team. The Canucks are a team that with that point took hold of the most points in the NHL. So it's a big win for the Detroit Red Wings, and that can't be undersold. And again, it comes back down to they had an abysmal second, but the way they responded was why it was my difference maker. Like coming out in the third and just completely wiping it away and having a great third period was awesome. Alex Lyon ended up with an plus 900 save percentage. He ended up being pretty good. I don't blame him on any of the goals against. I just wanted to add that as an addendum because I know people are going to want to know what we thought on Alex Lyon.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to do a little bit of standings watching, talk about the results of the teams that we are chasing / chasing us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yesterday or
a big game in Toronto, obviously, for the Wings as well. Are we tied now?
No. So Tampa won in the evening on Saturday. So technically they're in third with 61 points. Toronto lost against the Senators, and we don't like the Senators, but we like when the Leafs lose in regulation. So correct. I'm okay with that win.
That was a heck of an ending.
Yeah, it was a heck of a
hockey game.
Yeah, Morgan Riley is going to get probably a Perron.
Check out Locked On Leafs and Sens for some conversation about that. We're just plugging the whole network today, but there's a lot of good hockey this weekend, man. A lot of good hockey.
And a lot of good results if you're a Red Wings fan.
Yes, for sure.
So with the loss, the Toronto Maple Leafs lost. The Red Wings are currently tied in points for this first wild card, 60 points each. The Tampa Bay Lightning did win, so they took hold of the third in the Atlantic at 61 points. So while the Red Wings are technically on tiebreakers, fifth in the Atlantic Division, one win could leapfrog them to third. Like, that's how tight it is right now. Also, the Islanders lost, who was trailing going into Saturday, was only trailing you by 2 points. So a win on your end and a loss on their end made it a 4-point difference. I believe the Penguins lost 2 and the Capitals won, but the Capitals are 7 points back. So there's a little bit more breathing room. So it's not as panicky that they won that hockey game.
Yeah, no, man, it's kind of fun. It's just, when's the last time we were standings watching? I was at Duel in the D. I was in the nosebleeds of LCA with my roommate. We were watching the hockey game, and mid-game, I'm like, I have standings out, and I'm standings watching, and I'm score watching, and it's the middle of February, and that's post All-Star break, and that's exciting.
That's awesome. Well, and also, so we're recording this on Sunday afternoon before either of the 1:00 games kick off for the NHL. Yeah. They have 2 at 1:00 games, 1 and 1:30, because they're not going to compete with the Super Bowl because they're smart. So the Canadiens and Capitals are both playing a cross-conference game. They're 2 of the teams in this game, in this slate today, or Sunday as we record. Canadiens play the Blues. I'm not really too concerned about the Canadiens. They're pretty far back in the wild card race. Capitals play both the Capitals and the Canucks playing back to backs, facing each other here. So it's going to be. I hope the Canucks win that game. But
right.
As it stands right now, Red Wings are 1 point back of third in the Atlantic, tied for first in the wild card, and the team trailing them, the Islanders, the next closest team, is 4 points behind, and you have a game in hand on them. So that's the most urgent news that you should keep track of. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the standings and anything else in this hockey game, Scotty, you got anything else?
I don't think so. In terms of that, I just when we play again Tuesday and we play Edmonton, so that's
in Edmonton.
Fun. It just seems like we're talking about the tough January that we had, and now we have Vancouver, Edmonton, Vancouver to start off. Coming out of the All-Star break, February just in general. Vancouver, Edmonton, Vancouver, Calgary, Seattle. Obviously, the West Roadie, like you said. Colorado, St. Louis, Chicago, Washington, Islanders. So the second half of February gets a little bit easier there. But yeah, man, the Canada West Roadie is plus Seattle is definitely going to be Monday's game. We play Seattle at 3:30 p.m. this week. Anyway,
no, that's next week. That's President's Day. That's why.
Oh, makes sense. Oh yeah, February 19th. Cool. But yeah, man, this is just to kind of put a bow on it. This is last season. We have to remember that they dominated the West Canada Roadie, and that's even why we were having a conversation going into the back-to-back against Ottawa last year about, oh my goodness, are we going to end up buying at the deadline? Could this team make a push for the playoffs, right? Because did they nearly sweep? They dominated this trip last year.
They swept the Canada portion, but lost to Seattle.
And then, Seattle, right? So they dominated this trip last year, and it catapulted them back into the back end, obviously, of the playoff picture, and they ended up selling because Ottawa, beat the doors off them. But yeah, man, this is something that we know that they can hold their own in at a minimum, and if they do that, you're talking about coming home. The schedule gets a little bit more favorable. You don't have a cakewalk by any means, but it certainly gets a little bit more favorable there. And heading into the deadline, having some fun, man.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to it. And I think that's probably going to be our conversation tomorrow is expectations for February, because everything you just said rings true. And you have to have, as great as January was, you got to keep that rolling all the month of February if you want to not sell at the deadline. That's how close it is in the wild card and in the Atlantic Division. So we'll talk expectations for February tomorrow's episode. Scotty, final thoughts?
We ball, baby.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Tuesday. This is Monday's episode. Tuesday. Sorry, we're recording this on Sunday, so Mondays get discombobulated. Tuesday.
How long you been doing this?
Too long. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.